Hello, everybody. My name is Alex, aka Carry On, and this video is going to be a little bit different, actually. So first and foremost, happy holidays, happy New Year. The plan is for this video to be going out at the New Year, so if we time that correctly, you'll be seeing this on January 1st. If not, sorry, we missed the deadline. Yeah, so I wanted to approach this video a little differently with the start of the new year. I wanted to put out a video that would be a little more generic in terms of topic and just give you guys a better general sense of one of the main skills in Union Arena that I've found really help in the long run, and that is deck building. One of the common questions we get a lot is, how do we build this deck, or does X fit into this deck list, or do I have room to, take out something here to add something else there? And I think what I plan on tackling with this video is just those questions exactly. And hopefully for everyone else watching this video, you guys will get a better sense of how deck building works, some baseline rules that you can kind of follow for that, fit any IP or any deck, and then you can tweak it to your own preference. Really what I'm trying to get at is I want to help the general population get a general standard of deck building, and then you can change it to your own personal preference, add your little flavor, whatever it may be. So hopefully this video helps with that. So without further ado, let's get into the art of deck building. So we're going to talk about a couple things here today. I'm going to give a bit of a precursor first off, and then we'll go through step by step how deck building works, or at least the way that I approach it. We're going to go through the first step of deck building, some general rules of thumb just to follow as like a baseline template, and then we'll go into a little bit more of the topics that are less objective, more subjective, but still something you should always keep in mind. So playstyle versus preference is one, consistency versus high rolling is the other. And I think those two topics really tackle the question of how you approach deck building. And based on your answers, you'll figure out exactly how you want to make your list. And then last but certainly not least, the finishing touches. So let's go on a bit of a introduction to how deck building works. Union Arena decks come with very specific limits. So it is a 50 card deck, and 50 is a very awkward number because there is a limit of 4 for any given card. If you've noticed, 50 cards means it is a not perfectly divisible number by 4. So inevitably there's going to be some ratio of cards in your deck that is not a perfect set. And so I genuinely believe that's by design, and it's a good design. You can have up to 4 of any special, color, or final triggers. These are what we call special triggers or unique triggers. Additionally, you can only have up to 4 copies of any other card, unless otherwise specified. There are very rare instances where you can have more than 4 copies, but generally it's written specifically on a card, or there's some sort of pretext to it that lets you break the fundamental rules of deck building. One thing that I do want to add on to this is that while every IP has the same restrictions, different cards in a set will drastically change how you build a deck. And so one of the things you want to go into when tackling deck building is get a general lay of the land, look through all the cards, and just kind of get a sense of what is this set supposed to do, right? There are some sets that are very gimmicky. There are some sets that are very generic and have a whole bunch of generic effects that you would see across every set. And a lot of sets that are very built on the flavor that the IP comes from. And getting an idea of how your deck fits really gives you a good sense of how you should be building. And last but certainly not least, and this is something that I say to everybody, the only person you need to convince is yourself, right? If what you have agreed upon or decided on for your deck is good for you, it doesn't matter if 100 other people tell you that that deck is wrong. All that matters is that you are happy with your deck. And even off this video, right, we're going to go over some general rules of thumb for how to build a deck, but nothing that I'm going to tell you right now is like set in stone. You're always good to change things up. You're always good to, you know, have a bit of leeway and flexibility in the rules as long as you are happy with what you have finally created. Okay, so the first step into deck building for any IP is raids. And so raid cards are like the end goal of what your deck is trying to approach, right? Your deck build should always focus on getting to the point where you're just raiding cards. And that's mainly because a lot of the raids are where a lot of the power is, but raid is also usually the mechanic that lets you finally flip the switch and say, I'm playing the game. So your first goal should be looking at all available raid cards for a given set and color, and figure out how that raid card fulfills the power fantasy that it's looking for. What is a power fantasy? Essentially, in an ideal scenario, what is the main goal of the card? How does it reach its full potential, right? If you know how to reach the full potential, you'll figure out the conditions you need to meet to get there. So most decks, and you can take a look at any deck in the meta right now, will have 2 different raid cards, maybe more, and what you want to do is try and see what raids can work together. And so this could be anything from like any cards that have the same raid target, or if they're in the same IP, is there some sort of theme that the IP goes to? And even better, if there's even card text on the cards, right? Sometimes it'll, like, a raid will specify another card that happens to be a raid. And so it's like, okay, these 2 raids obviously work. Or maybe it specifies another card that is specifically for this deck. Then obviously you include that, right? Long story short, your raids are always going to be what you look at first when it comes to building a deck. So blue JJK here is an example that I've pulled up. Sukuna is a very obvious example here because it refers to a raid target, Yuji Itadori, and it refers to a specific card that's required in the card text if 1 or more copies of Sukuna's finger are in your sideline. So obviously, this one raid tells you 2 big things. 1, Yuji Itadori must be in the deck, as it's a raid target, and 2, Sukuna's finger must be in the deck, because that's how it gets its bonuses. We'll talk about some exceptions here and there, but generally speaking, when it comes to starting out deck building, you want to include everything that these raid cards kind of have on the text. You can figure out and finagle a little bit of details later. Now, because you are looking at a card that has Yuji Itadori as a raid target, it just makes sense to include the Yuji Itadori raid, right? It is another 4K body, it's another raid, it shares the same raid target, which means it's equally easy to raid on. And so you just get access to a raid that's easily accessible, easy to play, and just makes sense in the deck. Okay, so we're going to go over some general rules of thumb. The first 2 rules are what I'm going to call 1A and 1B. And these are the first 2 rules I almost always tackle when it comes to deck building, and that is your low end. So, rule 1A is 12 0 cost and 4 1 cost for a total of 16. If you've never played Union Arena, that's going to sound like jargon to you. So, to break it down, each color in a set, and in any set really, almost always includes the following cards: 4 0 cost raid targets, 4 0 cost draw options. So usually this is a draw 1, discard 1. Sometimes it's like a scry 1, like look at the top of your deck. And in rare cases, it's just a draw 1. Or 4 0 cost 2K bodies. Okay. Now, some sets include utility 0 cost, right? There are some 0 cost cards that are intended and designed to pair with other certain cards or archetypes or playstyles in a set. We're going to just focus on those later. Right now, you want to focus on the main 3 categories of 0 cost cards. Rule 1A generally is you want 12 0 cost cards and 4 1 cost cards. And that gives you a net total of 16 low end costs. Okay? Why these numbers? You can run the math on it if you'd like to, but generally, with 12 0 cost cards and 4 1 cost cards, you have somewhere close to a 95% where you get to play the game, where you get to have a 0 cost card in your hand, including a mulligan. So that means 95% of the time you get to play the game. That sounds weird to say, but in a game where RNG is inherently always active, 95% is just a really good number, and any additional cards past that point gives you diminishing returns. So 12 zero cost is like the sweet spot. 4 1 cost ends up being a sweet spot as well, as that gives you a chance to increase your energy count and play the game more as turns progress. Now, something to note here, some cards will overlap with the above inclusions. So for example, a card can be a zero cost raid target that also happens to be a 2k body. And that's fine, there's no problem with that. It just means it ticks off 2 of the 3 boxes and it gives you a little more wiggle room on how you want to build your deck. So some very common meta examples here. Red Kenshin is like the predominant aggro rush deck right now. It has a zero cost draw utility in Karu Kamiya, zero cost 2k raid target in Kenshin Himura, and a zero cost utility card here in the 3k. In this case, the utility being it's a bigger body at the cost of no trigger. So you can run 12 of those, and then you have a 1 cost Himura Kenshin, and that 1 cost you're probably going to play 4 of, and this will be your 16 low-end cards. Another example is you have zero cost Tenjiro Kirinji, which is your zero cost utility that happens to be a 2k. You have a zero cost Senjumaru Shutara, which is a raid target that's 1500. And you have zero cost Kiryu Hikifune, a zero cost 2k body. Okay, so you have your generic set of zero costs there, and then you have the 1 cost Senjumaru, which is a raid target with a trigger. So again, total of 16 low end. So that was rule 1A. The second, and this one's a little less common, but something that I really live by as a good ratio, is 11 zero costs and 6 1 costs. This gives you a total of 17 low end. The benefit of this is it keeps roughly the same odds of starting with an acceptable hand on the play, which means going first, while also significantly increasing your odds of curving out to 3 energy. So a lot of times you'll get these scenarios where your starting hand has a 0 cost and a 1 cost, which is great, but you don't have anything else. You might have a whole bunch of 3 costs or a whole bunch of 4 costs, right? That becomes really difficult because while you have units to play on your first turn, you can't curve to the 3 energy scenario very cleanly. And this, at the very least, gives you 1 more card to curve into it, while also still keeping the odds of you playing your first unit relatively similar. I say relatively, it ends up being, I think the math works out to like 92 or 91%, if I'm not mistaken, somewhere in that range. So you're giving up like 3% of starting the game, but the benefit is you're gaining an insane amount of turn 2 playability. I don't know the math on that off the top of my head, but it's significantly higher. It's somewhere upwards of like 15-20% increase. Now, this strategy is typically used when there's a lot more 1 cost options with good utility in a set. So in certain cases, you'll have a deck where like you have 2 1 cost units, both very strong individual units. Sometimes both are raid targets as well. So it's just kind of a no-brainer to be like, okay, I want to include both, right? This would be where that rule applies. Let's take a look at some examples. So Yellow Kaiju is a very meta deck, and in this scenario we have the 0 cost Mina, it's a raid target 0 cost, 0 cost Reno, also a raid target but a 2k body, and a 0 cost Hoshina, which is your draw utility, and if you play it the way I do, is also a raid target. But then on your 1 costs, you have Mina, which is a 1 cost searcher, and Reno, which is a 1 cost draw utility. So again, you have good 1 cost utility, and both of them are raid targets. So this just happens to fit the condition where it's like, okay, I could play more 1 cost units, and it would net positive my gameplay. Blue Full Metal Alchemist is also a very common example of this, where we have Riza and Roy, both of which have good one-cost units, both of which have one-cost utility, and both of which are raid targets. So again, no-brainer, you could play 6 one-cost units, 11 zero-cost units for a total of 17. If you look at a lot of the common lists for blue FMA, Riza and Roy one-costs usually have like 6 or 7 of them being played. My regional list took 7 of them, so I had 18 zero-cost and one-cost, and I got 4th place, so evidently that speaks some sort of volume to it. But yeah, you can always play a little higher on the one cost if you have the utility space for it. Now, rule number 2, this is a rule that I'm praying people pick up on more, and I'd love for this to be like a generally agreed upon rule, because I genuinely just hate one-ofs. If you've seen any of our previous videos on Haven, any of my previous videos that I've talked about, any of our review videos, you'll know I really just dislike one-ofs. So the most common question nowadays in UA is how many of X should I run? X being any card in the deck, right? Now, Union Arena by design is a high variance game. And so your game plan for deck building should always be to minimize deck variance, so that way you get to play the game the way you want to. And this is kind of compounded by the fact that there's no true tutor in the game. Tutoring, for those who are new to TCG, means being able to inherently search and go through your deck physically and pick out a specific card you want, and to be able to control where that card goes, usually to your hand or sometimes to the top of deck. In Union Arena, and in a lot of Bandai games, there's no such thing as a tutor. You cannot, pick up your deck, go through it, and pick a card, right? So, given that there's no guaranteed search like this, you always have to consider what happens if you whiff a search. And card counting, or sorry, not card counting, but the number of cards in your deck can actually dictate the numbers and odds of how frequently a search is successful, and also how frequently you can just naturally hit a card so you don't have to rely on these searches. With that in mind, generally, you will run the following counts based on the associated condition. And these are conditions that I have implicitly put on. This is not like a end-all be-all rule, but this is how I approach deck building, and this is the rules that I follow. So, if you need to see at least 2 of a specific card in a game, either you are super reliant on it, or it's part of your end goal, or you need it to function, and you need to see at least 2, you'll play 4 of. And this is most applicable to raids and raid targets. 3 of means that you need to see at least 1 and sometimes 2 in a game. So usually that's a lot of utility that is either a raid target or utility that dictates the gameplay of your deck. So things like milling your deck, drawing multiple cards, buffing your units to get over certain breakpoints and thresholds, you'll probably play 3 of. 2 of is when it would be nice to see this card at least once in a game, right? You don't have to see it multiple times. You don't have to see both copies of it. And there are some times where you won't see it at all, but it would be nice to see 1 in a game. This is most obvious in certain cases where it's like, this is just a win more card, or this is a card that's super conditional, and there are cases where I just won't find a use case for it. There are cases where I just play vanilla because there's no point in waiting for the condition to fulfill. But generally, you want to see it at least once in a game, or you want to see it at some point in 1 out of 2 games, roughly. And then lastly, 1-ofs is almost never or extremely niche, right? Again, you do not have guaranteed searching in this game, so if you're playing a 1-of in a 50-card deck, -7 for your life, so in a 43-card deck, how likely is it that you're actually going to hit it? Pretty low, especially if you don't have enough draw. And so, playing 1-ofs is almost never a good idea. And the only cases where I ever support a 1-of is it is a conditional finisher where it help solidify an end game condition at the very last turn because you have nothing else left, or B, you are genuinely confident that you can get through 2/3, if not more, of your deck. And right now, the only deck that matters that can actually do that is probably Green One Punch Man, because that deck inherently is designed to mill cards. Outside of that, there's currently nothing in the format. There will be eventually, but right now, one-ofs should not be a thing you rely on. Again, this is just my generic rules as a guideline. You do not have to follow them. This is what I believe in. But just keep in mind, one-ofs carry a lot of risk in the sense you'll never see it, and it ruins consistency in other parts of your deck. Double energy. Every deck runs double energy generators. Doesn't matter what kind of cards you have, what cost you're at. These are the cards that are just most efficient as individual units in the back line, as you only need one slot to generate 2 energy, which saves an additional slot in your energy line. And these cards are almost always utility cards. Bandai seems to be really hesitant to design double energy cards that are anything except utility. We will eventually see some double energy cards that end up being carries or like big damage cards, but up until this point, that's almost never the case. Depending on the highest energy requirement in your deck, you will have a varying amount of double energy cards, and this is the guideline I roughly follow for how many you run based on your max cap energy. So if your max cap is 4, for example, Blue JJK, usually your max cap is 4, Red Kenshin, your max cap is usually 4, you want to be running anywhere between 6 to 8 double energy generators, 8 being a little bit on the high end, 6 being on the low end. If your max cap is 5 cost or 6 cost, you're probably going to run 8 to 10 double energy generators. If you're on a 5 cost deck, you'll probably lean a little lower, so 8 to 9. If you're on a 6 cost deck, you're probably aiming a little higher, 9 to 10. The reason for that, and the reason why I put these guidelines is, and this is going to sound like I'm going to sound like a broken record here, but math matters in this game, and the math kind of supports that. Obviously, the higher your energy cap goes, the more double energies you're going to want. But also during gameplay, it'll feel way smoother and a higher chance of you getting to play the game when you have these double energy generators at a higher count if you need more energy anyways. For a deck that has 7 or 8 costs as its cap, you're probably going to want to play anywhere between 10 to 12 double energy generators. And anything above 8 cost usually has some sort of gimmick that increases energy generation. 8 cost for some reason tends to be like the generic cap on how big a unit will get, and anything past that is like you have to fulfill a unique condition to get there. So some examples is what I mentioned before: Green One Punch Man, Saitama. You have a Genos card that if it is used to play a Saitama card, counts as 3 energy, and for every 5 cards in your discard, Saitama's cost goes down by 1. So even if the cost is 15, which it is, you can get there by just having 8 energy in the back line because of these alternate generation utility units and conditions. One thing to keep in mind, of course, is that some double energy generators also act as raid targets, which means if you're planning to raid on top of them, you'll probably have to adjust your ratios with that in mind. You're probably going to want to run more double energy generation if you are expecting to raid on top of it and push it to the front, so you would lose 2 energy at some point. So just please keep that in mind. If your double energy generator is a raid target, err on the safer side and go a little higher on the double energy numbers. Okay, sorry about that. Apparently lost the battery to my my AirPods, so didn't get to record audio properly. So let's try this again. So the 4th rule is themes. So each deck has its own sort of uniqueness to it, and sometimes involves certain conditions to be met. So there are always like little bits of flavor that each set, IP, and deck gets, And sometimes these little bits of flavor can change how a deck is built. So just to start, we usually include the thematic touches, but we eventually can take liberties to, make our own choices, choose to include or exclude, figure out what sweet spot number makes sense for the flavor pieces. All of these get reiterated over time. And so some very common examples here. Dorothy in Nikkei set is a deck that benefits off of having no triggers. And so a lot of the times, your cards are not going to have triggers on them, but you get bonuses on units on board for being triggerless. So that's one way how a deck is built, sometimes even completely omitting final triggers because you just don't want to accidentally hit triggers off life. Other examples, Sukuna's Finger. We talked about this before, but Blue JJK tends to have a lot of characters that benefit off having Sukuna's Fingers in the discard, so we're going to include multiple of them to ensure we can see the fingers and then discard them appropriately so these decks get their bonuses. And then the last example we have here is the Royal Palace. This is more pertinent to the Squad Zero version of Bleach decks, where this card lets you search or look at the top of your deck to see if it is a Squad Zero card. If it is, you can add it to your hand. You probably want to include these in the deck because the Squad Zero theme is to discard or remove cards from hand in order to clear the board. And then General Rule 5 here is talking about high end. So we already touched on the raids, which is like our main goal, but what about the remaining high end slots? And by high end, we usually refer to these as cards that fall under one of the following categories. Either it's a high cost raid target, it is a non-raid 4K body with utility, or it's just another raid with some form of utility attached to it. So you can have additional raids if you want to that happen to be 4K or higher BP. You might have vanilla cards that are 4K BP with some form of effect on them. And then higher cost raid targets is usually more reserved for decks that have like 7 cost, 8 cost endgame raids, at which point you're probably going to need like a 5 cost, 6 cost body. The general rule of thumb with high-end units for your entire deck is you want to look for between 12 to 14 units with 4,000 BP or higher. Now, based on how a deck works and functions, sometimes you can have less, sometimes you can have more. So for example, the blue FMA deck that I piloted at the Gen Con Regional, I believe only had 12 4K bodies, and some decks actually err on the higher end because these 5K bodies or 4K bodies have some sort of net negative effect to make them be less effective than usual. So it really just depends on certain deck cases. And so after all is said and done, we have a generic framework, right? We have the 16 to 17 cards for 0 cost and 1 cost. Anywhere between 6 to 12 double energy generators, again, depending on your deck's max energy requirement. 12 to 14 cards as your high end with 4K or more BP. A handful of thematic cards. And then, of course, our unique triggers. So 4 special triggers relevant to the deck. 4 final triggers and 4 color triggers, again, relevant to the deck. We say relevant to the deck here because certain special and color triggers are more pertinent to a deck than others. Most sets and most colors will have 2 different special triggers. You usually play the special trigger that, refers to the characters in your deck. Now, keep in mind, some cards will have their categories overlap. Sometimes you'll have a 4K BP body that is also a double energy generator, in which case it knocks off 2 of these. Sometimes you'll have a color trigger that happens to be a 0 cost or a 1 cost, and that'll knock off 2 categories. But generally, this framework will have fleshed out anywhere between 32 to 44-ish cards. So what do you do with remaining spots? The next few points touch on more subjective topics, and it showcases how a player gets a little bit of expression in the deck. You get more freedom in customizing your deck. Now, I want to reiterate this point here. You only need to convince yourself if you like your deck and you think it's a good deck, right? This is going to be more relevant in these topics because this is really your chance to shine as a deck builder and your chance to make your own inclusions. So as long as you are happy with it, as long as you've convinced yourself this is a good choice, that's all that matters. So we're going to talk about playstyle versus preference. And this is a bit of a weird topic, and I'll give a better example of this, but the questions that we're looking to answer is, what is the deck designed to do? And you also want to answer, what do I want the deck to do? Sounds counterproductive to ask these two questions separately, but interestingly enough, you have some niche scenarios where maybe the deck is designed to do one thing, and you actually can create a version of the deck that does something entirely differently. Now, the Union Arena designers inherently have ideas of how a deck should play. And as a result, the game designers have these sort of templates on how to build a deck with a certain given linearity, right? So very common examples, a 2-cost character raid target that draws you cards in a deck that requires a lot of cards in hand. Obviously, it's designed to be played in that deck. Or a 3-cost double energy generator that generates an extra energy if you are using it to play a specific character. That probably means that unit is supposed to be in a deck using that specific character, right? So what you should be asking when you see the remaining slots in your deck and the other sets, or the other cards in the set, is your game plan that you envision the same as that deck's design? Or do you have an idea that actually complements the deck in a slightly different way? And most drastically, do you have an idea that completely subverts the deck's playstyle? Do you have a way to build the deck in such a way that completely reverses and changes expectations? All right. If you can't imagine it, here's a applicable example. So this is the Red Kenshin framework. This is the cookie cutter deck list that you will find when you are looking at Red Rurouni Kenshin. And so it's very straightforward, right? You have your 12 zeros, your 4 1s, 4 2-costs, or in this case 8 2-costs. You have 14 4K bodies. You have 8 double energy generators, 4 color, 4 special, 4 final. You're basically knocking off like every little check mark or every little box, right, in the framework that we have created. And so when testing this, template, I started to ask myself a couple questions. Do I always want to push units back? Because that's what Kenshin does. As a unit, whenever it wins a battle, it doesn't kill the unit, it pushes the unit back to the energy line. Is that something I want to always be doing? Another thing I noticed, doesn't this deck feel a little less impactful on the low end? It feels like if you're not a 4-cost unit or a 4K body, you're kind of useless offensively. And then lastly, I feel like without the Kaworu Kamiya 3-cost, the double energy generator, I'm never drawing enough. Is there any way to fix that? And you'll notice that all these questions are questions that came up because of how the deck was inherently designed. It was designed to push units back. It was designed to be a little weaker on the low end. It was designed to rely on a certain draw engine. So what can we do to make adjustments? And that leads to the adjusted Red Kenshin list that we have here. This is the final list that I personally have landed on as how to play Red Kenshin. And this was covered in my Red Kenshin guide. So if you haven't seen that, go ahead and check that out. But it answers some very fundamental questions that I had that I wanted to solve, right? Do I always want to push units back? Sometimes no. In the early game, I found that I enjoyed just like forcing the units to either make a decision of taking life or losing an early body. So I added the 0-cost Yahiko for early pressure, right? Otherwise, the opponent can just block a weak Kenshin with a weak unit and just put it back into the energy line. There's no pressure. I found that there was less impact on the low end, so what did I do? I added the 2-cost Kaworu Kamiya that buffs a unit by 1k BP when it's tapped. So now, all of my 2k units are 3k units, and my 0-cost 3k Kenshin actually ends up being a 4k body, which is extremely annoying to deal with on the offensive front, right? So I also end up increasing all the 4k battle power units to be 5ks, which gets over a lot of common walls, the 5k body wall specifically. And then lastly, Never found that I was drawing enough with just the 3-cost Kaoru Kamiya, so I also added the Hiten Mitsuru Yuryu, which, when you discard it with the effect of Red Kenshin, lets you draw a card. So it's just a way for me to have draw fodder without just relying on one unit, right? So the key point being, after testing the cookie cutter template, you start to realize that there are some glaring holes, and you want to adjust your deck list to sort of account for these holes. You can use the remaining spots in your deck to cover these holes and create a more holistic list at the end of the day. But there is also a way where you can just completely throw people amok mentally. The question that I asked, and I guess a good question that anyone can ask, is how do I keep what makes X deck good, but give it a little more Y, right? So in my scenario, I took the Red Kenshin list and thought, what makes this good, and how do I keep it good, but give it a little more oomph, a little more power, right? This is the deck list I ended up playing to Gatineau Regionals. It is a Red Kenshin deck where you keep the bare minimum Red Kenshins, but you add an entirely new raid in Sanosuke Sagara, and it drastically changes how the deck is played and its matchups. The idea being, I adjusted this list to account for certain matchups that I felt were going to be more prevalent in that regional. I expected a lot of Red Kenshin and a lot of Purple Saito, so I decided I'm going to add more Nullify Impact. Guess what? The Sanosuke raid is not only Nullify Impact, but if I pair it with more Kenshins, I have a total of 8 Nullify Impact and some damage too, so it's actually very offensively pressured. The opponent now also has different decisions to make, right? It subverts the expectations of being constantly pushed back into the energy line, and now they have to think, am I okay losing this unit? Do I want to hold it up to block the Kenshin instead because I know I won't lose it? Is there even a shot that they'll attack me with Kenshin or not, right? He might just choose not to swing with Kenshin, in which case I don't even get any value out of this unit. There's a lot more different questions and a lot more different expectations that they have to account for, right? So the lines are very different, the deck is very different, and now you have what is Red Kenshin, but an entirely different version of it. This is what I mean by when you can take a deck and just subvert expectations. And for those of you who think that this is just like something you can't really do without consistency, I took this deck to Gatineau Regionals, as I mentioned, and I finished 5-3, so 5 wins, 3 losses, one of which was sort of a gimme loss. So realistically, this deck could have top 16, right? So even if you change something that seems so cookie cutter linear and optimized, you are still able to potentially perform well with it and even get a nationals invite with it. So now we get to the point where we ask about consistency versus high rolling. Before we go on, let's give it a brief definition, right? So consistency is the ability to take the same set of actions multiple times and create similar to the same results, whereas high rolling is the ability to take that same set of actions multiple times and have a widely varying set of results. High rolling specifically refers to the widely varying results that benefit you. So something to look at is that some decks are designed to fit certain ways, and deck building is built to then change variants. So certain decks are very high rolling. Maybe it has less consistency options. Maybe it has really broken overloaded cards, but it just requires a lot of effort to get there, right? Other decks are just low to the ground, very easy to play, very straightforward, and you're almost always playing the game, right? The beauty of deck building is that you take these different types of decks and you can change it such that the variance is either minimized or maximized. And while this is heavily debated, I truly believe that the best decks to play in Union Arena, and you'll see this in the future as well, are ones that minimize variance and maximize efficiency, which means consistency is king. This is very different from what a lot of people might expect from a game that is best of one. There are some fundamental underlying design reasons as to why I think consistency matters in this game specifically for best of one, and we'll talk more about that later. Minimizing variance. There's a lot of different ways in a game where your variance is technically minimized that you might not even account for. Life triggers, for example, cards that let you draw or search the top X. Even things like your starting hand or your mulligan of the starting hand, all of these are just completely up to variance, and good deck building attempts to tackle variance in multiple facets of gameplay, if not all of these different facets of gameplay, right? So, for example, the number of cards you have for certain counts affect how you draw, how you search, what your starting hand is, and what your mulligan hand is. Effects that draw or discard from the deck affect your future draws and searches later because you are able to filter the deck. And triggers that benefit you on defense, for example, active triggers or special triggers or final triggers, ensure that you survive an extra hit and possibly even a full turn, right? And so when you are building a deck and when you're trying to finish your deck with the last X number of slots, try and keep in mind how you can minimize variance in your gameplay with your deck to always ensure you have opportunities of playing the game and finishing the game, as I genuinely believe that that is the best way to make sure you're not only enjoying playing the deck, but also pulling off solid results with it. So some examples of cards that minimize variance. We have classic filter cards, so draw one, discard one, draw two, discard two. We have searchers. Searching in this game is usually when you search top X. You have scry, which is looking at the top X number of cards and reordering or putting it to the bottom of your deck. And we even have active get and draw triggers, which change your defensive options, whether or not you see a card from life and whether or not you can see a card from deck, right? And even more than this, there's probably going to be other effects in the future that help diminish variance. If you are curious about like the most extreme examples, you can take a look at Yellow Sakamoto Days. It is a IP that has been released in Japan, and it has some of the strangest effects for some of the cards, one of which lets you actively look at the top deck of you, your opponent, and it lets you look at your life and your opponent's life. So that's also like a little bit on the extreme side of minimizing variance, but those kinds of effects will come out in the future, so always keep an eye out for any other things you can do to minimize variance. The second half is maximizing efficiency. So cards that have multiple effects, and what I'm going to refer to as overloaded cards, are almost always mandatory, right? And that's kind of common sense, right? If a card seems broken because it has a lot of effects, you're probably going to want to play it. Most cards in just baseline decks are the 3-cost cards that are the usual suspects for overloaded. They're a high enough energy cost to have a pretty good effect, and they're low enough commitment that it's pretty easy to play, right? 3 energy is not that hard to get in Union Arena, and you're probably almost always going to have 3 energy at some point throughout the game, if not through the entire game. So these kinds of cards are really, really easy to just overload with effects and kind of give a deck more oomph. When in doubt, always ask, could I have done this any other way with a single action? And if your answer is no, you probably have an overloaded card. Now, this is really important because sometimes you'll see a wall of text on a card and you think, Jesus, like, this has to be good, right? But if you look at the effect, it might only be an effect that's marginally better than a draw, in which case it's probably going to be the same as if you were just AP draw, right? Or on the flip side, maybe it's an effect that happens to be like 3 effects in one. Like maybe it's draw 2, discard 2, check the top of your life and put it back down, or something like that, right? Anytime that you have a card that has multiple effects like that, it's probably overloaded. And sometimes there are 2 or 3 cards in tandem that highlight that sort of efficiency. And these 2 to 3 card combos are almost always prevalent in some way, shape, or form in their respective decks. We're going to be looking at Maze Hues. This is a blue Full Metal Alchemist card, a 3-cost, and in a single 3-cost non-raid, here's what we see. It has an activate main ability that buffs it by 1k. All right, so it's already plus 1k. Enables discarding a card, which not only follows the deck power's fantasy, or the deck's power fantasy, sorry, but it has a when sideline conditional draw, which effectively works as a draw one, discard one. If that sounds familiar, it's a zero cost unit, which means it probably has one extra AP of value. It is also a color trigger, and the blue color trigger is a bounce to hand. So you bounce the 3500 body to hand, which by itself is also probably one AP worth of value. And lastly, it is a double energy generator. So this one card roughly contains 3 action points worth of effects in a single card. And the use cases are very flexible because it gives effects on the board, in your life because the color trigger, and during death because it has a when sideline ability. So overall, this card has a lot kind of packed into it in just very simple 3-4 lines of text, right? This is a common example that we see in a lot of 3-cost color triggers and is a primary example of a 1-card overload. Let's look at one that is a raid though. This is Anis, a yellow raid card in the Nikkei set, and in a single 4-cost raid here, we have Nullify Impact, which is usually 1 unit, Double Block, which is usually a separate unit, so 2 units, Draw 2, Discard 2, so like I mentioned before, we're going to look at equivalency here. If Draw 1, Discard 1 is 1 action, Draw 2, Discard 2 is probably 2 actions. And lastly, a conditional Draw 1. Draw 1 usually is considered 1 action as it's the equivalent of an AP draw. So, assuming we need to play a 0-cost raid target to raid on top with Anis, we're essentially using 2 actions, the 0-cost target and raiding Anis, to get 4 actions of value. A body for Nullify Impact and Double Block, Draw 2, Discard 2, which is 2 actions of value, and the conditional draw, 1 action of value. Obviously, this comes with risks, right? And this will always happen with overloaded one overloaded card, is that if the opponent removes the card, they're removing multiple actions of value. In this case, they're removing 2 actions of value because they removed the Nullify Impacts / Double Block. But you already got the value from your Draw 2, Discard 2 and the conditional draw, so you can consider it even, so to speak. Now let's look at a 2-card combo. This is a very common 2-card combo in Kaiju number 8's yellow color. Reno Ichikawa is a 3-cost raid that, when played, can play another 3-cost body. And it has a condition where if it sees another 3-cost body in the same line, it is buffed to 4K. Now, by itself, it doesn't seem that great, right? It is a 3-cost energy raid that cheats a 3-cost body effectively. So I guess you could consider it 2 AP worth of value in a single raid. That doesn't seem wild because it's a raid target in a raid, 2 expected bodies, 4 2 expected bodies. However, the combo comes into play when you pair it with Kikoru Shinomiya. This card, when it's cheated in by the effect of any character, site, or event card's ability, it restands 1 AP. So, if you raid Reno, which is 1 action, and you cheat out Kikoru Shinomiya, it gives you back the 1 AP for a net total of 0 AP. So archetype notwithstanding, this combo brings out 2 3,500 base battle power bodies for 0 actions, while also fulfilling his own self-buff condition. So, for 0 cost, 2 bodies. Extremely efficient, actually technically infinitely efficient. And so these kinds of combos are always going to be prevalent in its deck archetype. And lo and behold, Reno and Kikoru have their own deck archetype where it's just 3-cost rushdown, right? So it just makes sense that you would include these kinds of combos in this deck. And if you were to play or build Kaiju Yellow, you would look at this combo and go, oh, this is extremely AP efficient. I'm going to try and fit this in with the extra slots I have left over. So now, all of this is to say, you can fill the remaining slots in your deck by simply following these very key concepts. You will always add cards that either A, align with your game plan and deck design, B, minimize variance to ensure you always have a line of play, and C, are AP efficient to ensure you are always getting your actions worth of effects. Okay, that's what every deck's remaining X number of cards is, almost always. Now, sometimes you're going to get scenarios where, like, you have 8 spots and there are 12 different cards that you want to include. That's great. That means you have options. So how do you gauge those options? You play a crap load of games, right? You make your adjustments, you test it out in gameplay, take the feedback from it, repeat. Make the adjustments, play more games, get some feedback, adjust. Play some games, get some feedback, adjust. It's an ongoing loop, and this is why playing so many games and figuring out what deck builds you like is so important. All of this can be just figured out by over time going through as many different iterations as you can until you finally land on the one beautiful deck list. So lastly, let's just apply the finishing touches here. On screen, we're going to have a very traditional blue FMA deck, and it's going to have the following highlighted. As we mentioned before, it's going to have the raids. It'll have your 0 cost and 1 cost units. It'll have your double energy. It will try to have themes. In this scenario, we didn't get any thematic inclusions. It will have 12 to 14 high-end units. And lastly, it'll have all of their unique triggers. Again, there's probably going to be a whole lot of overlap. Sometimes the unique triggers are double energies and so on, but we'll ignore that for now. And then let's assume we like the original game plan that the deck designers had for the deck. Let's add some cards that minimize variance and add some cards that maximize efficiency. And there you have it. That is the deck list that you want to be playing, and that is a good starting point. So here's some final thoughts. The importance of deck building in a game of variance cannot be understated enough, right? Or overstated enough. A lot of your large-scale event results are going to boil down to how your deck functions, right? It's even more so in a best-of-1 game that does not have real tutorable searches. You have to make sure your game is consistent. You have to make sure there is as linear of a game plan as possible when it comes to fluctuations and results. And you always have to have contingency plans built into your deck, right? So just keep in mind that Union Arena, as a game of high variance, people aren't going to realize this, but honestly, deck building is probably your biggest strength when it comes to doing well in Union Arena. Second point, this guide is not a catch-all guide, like I mentioned before. There's always going to be cases or niche scenarios where deviating from what I consider the norm and what many people consider the norm is completely acceptable, right? Take that in stride, just go with the flow, adapt to what is given to you, and keep in mind that while this is a quote-unquote guide, this is just guidelines, realistically. Do what's right for you. Which brings me to my last point, and another final reiteration, because it's so important. You only need to convince yourself, okay? Just be confident and understand what you are building, what you want the deck to do, and if you're happy with what you have, play the ever-living crap out of it, okay? So thank you all for listening. Thanks for sticking through the remainder of this video. I know I blab a lot, and that's kind of just like my shtick. So I hope you guys enjoyed. Best of luck in deck building. Have a great 2026 for everybody watching. And I hope Union Arena for you guys is just as fun as it is for me, especially with this upcoming year. We have a fantastic lineup coming up. All right. If you liked this content, please like, comment, and subscribe. Really, that helps out a lot, especially comments. The past videos have been doing great on that front, and I love having discussions in the comments. So if you guys have questions, if you have your own tips and tricks, if you have any, I don't know, any weird niche scenarios that you can think of for deck building that might not fall in this guideline, please include that. I would love to be enlightened. So best of luck, and take it easy, guys.